So I'm delighted to say joining us on the We Are West Ham podcast for the first time ever is Sun Sport journalist, big Man United fan, Phil Cadden. Cads, it's great to have you with us. United sort of in trouble this season. It's been an up and down one. Erik ten Hag came in, excellent start, trophy in the bag. It's hard to gauge whether it's a positive or a negative. I would say overall pretty good, but I sit around you a lot of the time. And your view on the whole thing perhaps changes my mind week in, week out. At this stage, what are you feeling about the season?
Well, you probably don't realise how bad it was last season, Will, under Ralph Rangnick, our third manager of the season. I would say overall, Erik ten Hag's had a positive impact at United. One trophy in the bag and they're heading for the top four, still with a cup final on the horizon as well. I think they need 3 more wins to get into the Champions League, secure that spot, whether it's third or fourth, with 6 games to go, and I think they will do it. So overall, you would have to say it's been positive.
Yeah, it seems it just seems like you've got a bit of identity and a bit of character back, like you said with the stuff with Rangnick. It got a bit chaotic, isn't it? There'd been somewhat of a dip recently, isn't there? What would you put that down to? Were you surprised to see that, or?
I think it's down to tiredness, if I'm being brutally honest. It might come across as an excuse, but they've played 55 games, I think, already this season. They've pretty much played in every game possible.
Yeah.
And if you think of the World Cup midway through the season, they've played, whether it's Saturday, Thursday, Saturday, Wednesday. They've not had many midweeks off.
Yeah.
And while they've got a good first maybe 11, 12, the squad has been shown up in recent weeks where they've had injuries throughout the team. And that's highlighted what needs to be done now moving into the summer. They need a centre forward. They need another centre back that can basically provide competition when Varane and Martinez, who will both be out for this game, are missing. And they just generally need standards to lift. You said you weren't sure about how good United have been this season, but I think that's probably the key principle that Ten Hag's installed is the raising of standards again, and that will drive United hopefully over time back towards the top.
Yeah. I think that's one thing. It does seem to have changed. I know the way Ten Hag dealt with the Ronaldo situation seemed to garner the respect of United fans across the country, pundits. Everyone thought, well, he sort of stamped his authority on that. It was obviously a battle of wills. United took the decision to let Ronaldo go. Do you think that situation has had a big of an impact, as I'm suggesting, as far as the rest of the players sitting up and going, oh, hang on, the club have backed him here against Ronaldo? Did that sort of play into them all of a sudden having this bit more respect for him that they perhaps didn't have for the managers past, Solskjaer, Rangnick, Carrick maybe?
Well, it's a fear factor, isn't it? And it goes back to when we always talk about United, we talk about Sir Alex Ferguson, and probably the managers since haven't really commanded that respect.
Yeah.
You know, you can go through from David Moyes. He didn't really command the respect of the senior players when you consider some of the comments that came out after he left from people like Rio Ferdinand.
Yeah.
Then you move into Louis van Gaal, and while Louis was very different in his approach, the style of football probably didn't suit United. It was probably outdated.
Yeah.
Then you had Jose Mourinho, who came in, hardline approach, brought in big personalities in Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Paul Pogba, but we all know Jose has quite a short life in terms of how long that can go, although he did have success. And then it's sad to say that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, while a crowd favourite, everyone wanted him to do a good job, but he sort of had a caretaker mentality about him, the school supply teacher.
Yeah.
And that continued a little bit under Rangnick, and the wheels fell off. But going back to Erik ten Hag, I think with the decision with Ronaldo, the way he's also managed Harry Maguire through the season, he's not been afraid to make big calls, and whether that's to drop players after certain games. He keeps using the word unacceptable, but I think that's partly more down to his English than actually, getting that message across. But I think he just needs now 3 or 4 good signings in the summer to really sort of stamp his authority on the team again. I think he's almost got into a situation now with United that because they're still fighting on a couple of fronts, he can't sort of move players to one side. Yeah. He could with Ronaldo because that opportunity presented himself just before the World Cup, and Ronaldo really with that interview made his own bed.
Yeah, sure.
But I think he sort of had to fight against those sort of, I'm not saying bad eggs in the dressing room, but there's clearly certain players there that I don't think he'll want long term. We'll see a lot of players leave in the summer, and hopefully again standards will be raised again.
Yeah, sure. You mentioned the Harry Maguire situation there. I know a lot of fans like to use him as kind of a figure of fun, don't they? But at the end of the day, it cost you 85 million quid or whatever it was. It's probably fair to say, given that Virgil van Dijk around that time went for 75 million, the levels since those two transfers have taken place have been vastly different. What do you make of that situation? Like I say, he is a figure of fun to some people. However, there's still a guy there who gets in the England squad, clearly not a terrible footballer. Again, it seems, from my perspective, time to move on. Ten Hag seems to be edging towards that. He's not going to be... It just seems an awkward position as club captain for him to just accept a squad role. What do you make of that situation and Ten Hag's handling?
Well, there was two current things from the weekend, actually, against Aston Villa. That you talk about a figure of fun. Aston Villa fans actually cheered him onto the pitch for the final few minutes, which sort of sums up the situation. Yeah. The second thing is, I believe Maguire didn't get the captain's armband for the first time when he came onto the pitch. Now, listen, there might have only been 10 minutes left or how many minutes it was, but usually in previous games, Bruno Fernandes, who is the match day captain, because when Maguire doesn't play, would pass it on, and that didn't happen. Now, I think it's for a lot of United fans, it's pretty simple. Probably for the last 18 months, I don't think Maguire's performances have been anywhere near good enough for the football club. Yeah. And it's been brought out more evident than normal by the performances of Rafael Varane and Lisandro Martinez. The pair of them have been exceptional for United this season. I know people talk about Casemiro being the most important player, but the difference in those two centre-halves has raised the United team considerably. Yeah. And it's also helped De Gea behind them, that he doesn't have to worry. We saw it in the Seville game, playing out and then playing it to the likes of Lindelof and Maguire. You can just visibly see the nerves and the pressure playing out with those players compared to when it's Martinez and Varane. I think there was a social media clip last week showing the difference between Martinez was played the same ball by De Gea in a game against, I think it was Betis in the Europa League, and he dealt with it and he started the attack, and that's why he's been a really good signing. He's a good defender, but he can also play. Maguire isn't that type of player. While he's been good for England generally have played three at the back. International football teams, especially the forwards, don't press as much. Yeah, he's also got the extra protection of a holding midfielder as well as the three at the back. So it's almost like England protect him a little bit, but that would never happen at Old Trafford. United rarely, only really, I think, under Solskjaer in the last couple of games, he went to a three at the back, but United have always been a four at the back team, and you almost need to be on the front foot as well. Generally, United will have possession in a lot of games, so that's why they need the defenders to be capable on the ball. And sadly, that's just the way it is. That Maguire, he came from Leicester. He's a good player, but he's not a great player. And, it'll be good. Hopefully, he lifted one trophy with Fernandes in February at the Carabao Cup final, and hopefully he'll lift another one. But I don't think anyone at the end of his time at Old Trafford will say he's been a success.
No, quite definitely not. As you mentioned there, it's sort of Martinez in particular. Obviously, Varane's a class act, but Martinez in particular, who didn't have that, outstanding European pedigree that Varane had when he came into the club. Even he has shown Maguire and Lindelof to an extent, but has shown them up, hasn't he? And it feels like an awkward one whereby Maguire will have to leave. I could go through all day with you, and I know we have done in the past, away from the podcast, but which players at United you'd like to see leave? Just quickly, give us a quick yes or no then before we move on, talk a bit more about the game at London Stadium on Sunday. Harry Maguire, David De Gea, stay or go at the end of the season, assuming there's appropriate replacements, obviously, but what would you do with those two, just briefly?
Harry Maguire goes, David De Gea stays, probably because they need to make signings in other areas, which are probably more important, i.e. striker. They probably need another right-back, centre-back competition. It's probably been exposed that they need another centre midfielder this season. And then there's always a question mark about United's attack on the flanks as backup, because Rashford's been exceptional this season.
Yeah.
Anthony's grown into the season as time has gone on, but Sancho's been very hit and miss. Weghorst, loan signing.
Again, not that level.
Not the level. Works hard, but not the level for United.
Yeah.
Only brought in because Martial can't be relied on, and he hasn't been relied on for 5 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's other areas in the pitch I think that United needs to focus on probably before they need to replace De Gea, because ultimately, if you're going to get a new goalkeeper in, you've got to spend a good 60, 70 million now, because you're looking for a goalkeeper, but also a ball-playing goalkeeper.
Yeah. And that seems to be the criticism levelled at De Gea often, doesn't it, about his ball-playing abilities, obviously highlighted a little bit in recent times as well. But look, Cads, we'll move on to the game. West Ham have obviously got Manchester City on Wednesday away at the Etihad, assuming, unlikely to get anything out of that with City chasing the title, of course. Man United on Sunday come to town at the London Stadium. West Ham had a bit of a pickle run of games-wise. We certainly know what you mean as far as tiredness goes with the run in the Europa Conference League that we've had. Slightly different pedigree of opponent, of course, but it's that same Thursday, Sunday slog. And that's potentially one of several factors which has affected West Ham's performance this year. But going into the game at London Stadium, you mentioned it before we hit record earlier on, that West Ham always up their game against Manchester United. You must be used to that. Teams up and down the country no doubt do. What's your general feeling going into that game on Sunday with, as you mentioned, United still chasing a top 4 place and needing the points at this stage of the season?
Well, first of all, Will, do you think West Ham might rest one or two? You've got a semi-final, I believe, next Thursday.
Next Thursday, AZ Alkmaar.
So would you rest a few and potentially?
Thing is, potentially the points are still vital. We've been through this, the two of us, and earlier on the podcast with Jonesy, that West Ham are 4 points clear of the relegation zone with those, and they need 3 teams to make up 4 points on them. 2 of those teams have got such a terrible goal difference they need to make up 5 points on us.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't think we'll get anything at City. I think it's a really difficult one for David Moyes, because I think he has got more chance of getting something out of the United game on the weekend. However, I honestly think the Conference League could make or break whether he still has a job next season or not. I think if he wins it, which is definitely winnable, then he keeps his job. But it's a really fine balancing act he's got to. And he's obviously, West Ham's form has left us in this position. If we were 12th, where Crystal Palace are, totally safe, the focus would just be on the Conference League. But he can't afford, I don't think, to not try or at least go for something in the game against United, because otherwise that just puts so much pressure on the games that we've got. Our other Premier League games, other than City, United, are Leeds and Leicester, who are those teams that need to overtake us. So it's a really fine balancing act. Whether he'll rest too many, I don't know. But even when fans have been crying out for him to rest players, he hasn't. And there's a sense, again, as with last season and the run to Europa League semi-final where they burnt out at the end of the season, that there's a bit of same again. Yeah,
I actually, even though I posed the question, I don't think he will rest players. I think Moyes, if he's going to rest players, he might do it at Man City before United.
Definitely.
And the fact it's Sunday to Thursday, it is a long enough gap anyway.
Yeah.
West Ham away for Manchester United is always a bit of a nervy one, in the respect of, I can still remember 1992, Kenny Brown.
Yeah, Ludo McCloskey
in 95. I mean, the last time I think I went to the London Stadium was 2019, and United were absolutely abysmal that day. I think Cresswell scored a free kick that day.
Yeah.
And even though United have won the last two at the London Stadium, I won't bring up Jesse Lingard, but he scored the winner, obviously, in the last game.
Or I think it was Dean Henderson's kick that went out for a throw.
Did it go out?
Yes.
I think that was during the COVID days, wasn't it, where there was only 500 fans allowed in the ground. But so United have always had a tough game. I think that's my point, really. United have always had a tough game, regardless of the positions of the two teams in the league. I just think that United probably will take a point now.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I just think it's a bit like the Tottenham game they had last week, where even before the Tottenham game, I would have said, away games now for United, take a point, and they're so good at Old Trafford at the moment, United, that they will get enough points to get into the top four. So, I think for United this weekend, it'll be take a draw and get out there.
Yeah, fair enough. I think West Ham are there for the taking, frankly. I think.
Well, so are Tottenham.
Well, that is true.
And while we did it for 45 minutes, we can't seem to string together a 90-minute performance.
Yeah.
It was encouraging against Villa at the weekend. Villa are obviously really confident at the moment. And while it wasn't the most prettiest of matches, and United didn't create too many clear-cut chances, because sadly the attack this season, while keep saying Rashford's been excellent, the other parts of the attack just have not come together, that it becomes a fluid attack, like a Man City, like a Liverpool of the past, even Arsenal this season. And that's why United need a central striker, and they probably need one other forward to complement it, just to make it a bit more slicker and start putting teams away. Because at the moment, if you look at, I think they've played 32 games, is it now? They've got plus 10 goal difference, which is pretty poor for a team who are in the top four.
Yeah, of course. So looking ahead to that game Sunday, you mentioned sort of your general feeling around the game and it being a sticky one. What do you expect style-wise? Obviously from Ten Hag primarily, but how do you expect the game to look from a sort of style perspective?
I would imagine the way I've seen David Moyes' side set up, and particularly against the bigger teams, he seems to be a bit more cautious, doesn't he, in those games? And that leads to maybe dropping off and allowing United possession. Whereas actually, I think if West Ham went for United and tried to press from the front, they might get a bit more joy. Because I think if they sit off, Shaw's playing with Lindelof at centre half at the moment, and Shaw, to be fair to him, has been brilliant. He's almost developed into the Martinez role, and the other player I would link him to is Daley Blind, who traditionally maybe a full-back who then became versatile in different positions, but just good quality on the ball, can see a pass, can play it quickly through the lines in midfield. And I just sort of think that maybe West Ham just needs to be brave.
Right.
Really, really attack United. I mean, I think West Ham, Bowen's been pretty good in recent weeks. Antonio seems to be showing a bit more from what, but I don't watch West Ham every week, so you might disagree. But
a bit more
from the highlights, it seems that he's being a bit more sharper and a bit more involved than maybe a few months ago, where it probably looked like he couldn't score.
He was only going one direction from there.
And
you are right.
Even Souček, he from speaking to yourself and other West Ham fans, he was excellent when he first arrived at West Ham, but he's been pretty laboured, hasn't he, in recent time. So it seems as if West Ham, I know you lost to Crystal Palace, but it seems as if West Ham have improved over recent times.
There has been improvement.
And Declan Rice is the obvious one, because he more than anyone seems to want to impress for the next few weeks, because it seems pretty obvious that he'll probably be moving on at the end of the season.
Absolutely. So United, would you expect, obviously it seems funny that West Ham won't be dictating how the game goes, I assume. I suppose they will by sitting back. But do you expect United to deal with that quite comfortably if Moyes goes for his more, cautious defensive approach.
Yeah, I think they're so used to having possession in most games that it'll effectively come down to if that's the way West Ham set up and sit back, that can United take those chances? They've been pretty wasteful, in honest, all season. Even while I'll say they didn't have clear-cut chances against Villa, they still had opportunities that if better final pass or better finishing, really, whether it's Rashford, Sabitzer, Fernandes, Casemiro was unlucky hitting the bar, but that you can just sort of tell that they're such a hot and cold team that you just want them to be a bit more ruthless in front of goal. And if United can be ruthless and maybe score early, then maybe get the key second one, you could see, obviously, it being a much easier night, because obviously a night atmosphere at London Stadium should be pretty good. Yeah,
of course. So, Cads, just before we let you go, a couple more questions. One's very brief. Give us a score prediction then, Sunday night. London Stadium, West Ham v Man United in the Premier League.
1-1.
1-1. I think you spoke to every single West Ham fan listening to this podcast, and every one of them would take that, I think, at this stage of the season, the way we've been playing. And that point would be huge for both sides, really. One thing that I do just want to get on, it's a little bit left field, and I only mention it because you mentioned Declan Rice there. Whenever anyone has been saying to me in recent times, be they fellow West Ham fans or football fans of other clubs, where's Declan Rice going to go? I think, I'm of the same opinion as you, where it seems inevitable that Declan Rice is going this summer. I'm sort of low-key understanding that that's some very informal conversations that have been had at the club over the last sort of couple of seasons. He hasn't signed a new deal. It's kind of all been leaning towards this summer being the one where he makes his big move. Whenever anyone says, where's he going to go? I've continually been saying repeatedly, Man United would be daft not to lift heaven and earth to bring Declan Rice in, especially because I think the players he was going, obviously Casemiro's been outstanding for you, but he's not a long-term option. Scott McTominay and Fred. Other than that, I don't really know. Declan Rice is better than those two players. I don't really know where United go for a cent. Easily better than Fred.
I'm only joking.
But yeah, what do you make of all that?
I'm still not convinced Declan Rice is a Manchester United midfielder. Maybe this might be harsh, but for the money that you would have to sign him for, you are almost looking for players of the past, and I would go along the lines of Roy Keane. So is Declan Rice a box-to-box midfielder who can do everything like Roy Keane?
He wants to be.
But can he do it on a weekly basis? Not convinced at this stage.
Yeah.
But he's good and I like him, and I do agree with you. He's better than Scott McTominay. He's better than Fred. But the influence of Casemiro this season probably then raises doubts over whether could Declan Rice come in this summer and play alongside Casemiro, or would he just be, another player? You would have to spend how much on Declan Rice? 100 million?
Probably, yeah.
So you almost don't want, if you're going to spend a lot of your budget on a £100 million player, he has to play every game. Now, do I see Declan Rice as an 8? I'm not convinced that he is an 8. No. So the only position he would play at United would be where Casemiro plays. Yeah. And I don't think he's anywhere near the level of Casemiro just yet. Where I see him going, I actually do see him possibly going to Arsenal.
Right. Because
they're crying out for more strength in midfield. That's why they brought Jorginho in. And I think that, would he stay in London? Everyone says Man City, but Rodri's there. I thought originally Chelsea, but because of Mason Mount and that connection. And I know obviously he was there at the very start of his career as well. But I just sort of sensed that maybe he's heading more towards Arsenal than Manchester United. And the other point I would make is, if you offered me the choice of spending £100 million on Declan Rice or Jude Bellingham, Jude Bellingham every day.
Yeah, but I genuinely think Bellingham will go for more than Declan Rice this summer. Right?
But he would complement the midfield United have got at the moment. I could see a Casemiro, a Bellingham, a Fernandes. I couldn't see for £100 million Casemiro, Rice, Fernandes, and that midfield improving.
Yeah.
Because United have done a stopgap option this season of Eriksen, who's been excellent.
Yeah.
But in a lot of games, Eriksen is good against the teams, and he might well. This might sound harsh, but West Ham in the position they are in the table, he'll thrive in a game such as West Ham. But then when we play any of the sort of maybe top 6 sides or teams at the latter stages of Europe, it's been very noticeable that Eriksen's gone missing in those games. He doesn't have the same command, and he also tires after about 60 minutes in a lot of these games. So it's important that while they've done a stopgap measure on the midfield, it's a real area this summer that they need to really raise the bar.
Yeah, I'm intrigued in that because do you think, I understand what you say about when you're paying that much money, you want immediate impact on your team. What is it about Casemiro? Obviously, he's been great, but I think the goal, I haven't got them in front of me, but I've checked not too long ago.
Yeah.
The goals and assists numbers between the two are not vastly different. If anything, Rice may even have the edge. I'm not certain, I haven't checked. But so what is it exactly, when you talk about this all-round team impact, what is it exactly that you get from Casemiro? Because ultimately I see two slightly different versions of the same thing, and predominantly defensive midfielder who can do a bit of attacking, who has a big impact on the team. I'm intrigued.
I'll be brutally honest here. When Casemiro signed last summer, I had fears that we were signing another Bastian Schweinsteiger, someone who was coming towards the end of his career, and the question marks just over how committed he would be to the football club. And you always ask the question, why are one of the European giants selling one of their players? And United certainly didn't get the best out of Schweinsteiger, whether that was the manager, Louis van Gaal at the time, or whether it was the team or however the setup was. But I just think Casemiro, and there's a couple of things that have really stood out. It's not just he can play the position as a specialist, as a holder. He's been much better on the ball than I would have ever given him credit for at Real Madrid. He was maybe a bit unnoticed at Real Madrid because their midfield, either side of him in Kroos and Modric, was so good that actually this guy, you watch United actually, and a lot of their attacks at the moment start with Casemiro. The quick pass, whether it's a diagonal from right to left or just a forward-thinking pass, which will set Rashford or Fernandes free. It's the way he passes, which is so slick and precise, and it oozes quality. Yeah. You'll see other players try that. Well, a lot of them won't try the pass, for one, or two, their accuracy would be probably below 50%.
Yeah, sure.
But I would say that this guy is 80% of the time delivering. And then secondly, I think it does go back to aura, leadership, takes responsibility, not just for his job, but for others. And you can see him cajoling people. If there's an issue at right back, he's over there, he sorts it, no messing about. But even there was a great clip at the weekend, and he's done it twice now this season. Post final whistle, and on both occasions they've won the game. He's gone up to Bruno Fernandes, and whether it's a Bruno Fernandes thing, that might be another matter. But he's almost questioned him, called him out after the final whistle. Why haven't you done something correctly in the game?
Yeah.
That is going back to Roy Keane levels of calling people out, raising standards, basically not taking any bullshit from the team. Yeah. And that is why I think I've been impressed with him this season. And I know Declan Rice is captain, West Ham, and he's a leader, and you can see that he is growing into that role. But Casemiro is ready-made. There's no question marks about him, and that's why I would just think that because United will probably have to spend, as I say, Bellingham. You're probably looking at potentially Harry Kane. can they really go out and spend that sort of money on Declan Rice? I just don't think it would be my option.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, look, Cad's been absolutely brilliant having you with us on the show for the first time. Thanks for joining us. Looking ahead to that game Sunday afternoon or evening, 7:00 kickoff, I believe, isn't it? A bit of an
I think it's for the coronation, isn't it?
Oh, of course.
They moved a lot of the kickoffs maybe further back because policing.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, Sunday night, London Stadium, West Ham v Man United, points on the table, important for both sides. But that's Phil Cadden there, Sun Sport journalist, big Man United fan, joining us to look ahead to that game.